Welcome to our webinar. Today we are talking about exposure management, and we are especially focusing from setup to security ROI, that why it's important to start thinking about exposure management instead of vulnerability management. And this is the presentation that we did in our annual, the biggest annual customer and partner event Sphere. And now we will go through the same content as a webinar because we have received a lot of demand to get this material and the presentation.
We are going to use today this sandcastle analogy. So you might see here that we have in the picture a sandcastle that is sitting on top of the sand, and then we have stormy waters and some stormy clouds. And maybe to put some context behind why we are using this analogy, I think it fits very well, this vulnerability management versus exposure management theme. So first of all, we would need to start thinking about that old vulnerability management thinking. We need to challenge a bit of our old thinking that what is actually more important than just trying to fix and run through individual vulnerabilities. So of course, the first question is that is the vulnerability or misconfiguration even usable?
Yeah, and you can understand, or you can think about this sand castle, and you have a lot of those grains of sand there in the castle, and you can think about that maybe some of those are misconfigurations, some of those are vulnerabilities. So how do you find those from your castle?
And then, of course, you should use your time to fix the issues that really matter. So, for example, vulnerability management point of view, traditionally, you use the CVSS scores. The higher the CVSS score, that should be probably your highest priority, but that's not necessarily the case. You might have something that is a very high CVSS score, but it's not really usable for the attacker in your setup. So the severity or CVSS score does not equal the priority of remediation. That's very important to understand. And what about identifying the weak spots?
Yeah, so you really need to understand that what are those weak spots that you can make the most effective improvement to your digital estate, where you should start, what to fix first. And this is the most important thing when thinking about exposure management, that we are not thinking about like individual things, but we try to put everything to the bigger picture, understand the attack surface, and understand also attack paths, that if I would fix this one thing, that would remove my cybersecurity risk completely.
Yeah, and where should I start fixing it? That also has a huge importance. What is the most effective choke point to fix the current exposure that we have?
And of course, nowadays, if we go further, then we need to think about that cloud and identities are also important. It's not anymore that we can think about devices. We are connected, we are using cloud services, cloud applications, and of course, identities is linked to everything. That's the way how you will authenticate to your cloud services, how you authenticate your internal services, and that's the reason why you need to have wide visibility to the whole estate.
And of course, we need to do this continuously. So it doesn't really help that we fix things once and then we are like, okay, we're good to go. That's not the case. So environments are in constant change, which means that your configurations and relationships between the configurations are ever changing, which means that what is now safe at this moment might not be in 1 hour's time or in 1 day's or 1 week's time and so forth. So you really need to have kind of like the visibility, how all the dots are connected together and what's the linkage between those dots and how to kind of like identify that, oh, now we have a new situation at our hand, which is due to some change in our environment, which we couldn't really understand before that was made. And at the end of the day, what we are doing.
Yeah, so end of the day, it's like make life hard for the attackers. So this is exactly what we want to do. Make sure that our castle is strong. It's not possible to break it down. And this is why we need exposure management, that we have full understanding.
Yeah, and we create this sandcastle analogy, kind of like with the sand walls and whatnot. So this could be your environment. So we have a perimeter network, we have firewalls, the doors are pretty much closed, but there could be a point where the attacker could kind of like bypass our perimeter walls, for example, and then in the next segment, actually there is no gate at all. It's totally open from one point. So this is typically like your networks. This could be that you have partially segmented your networks, but once you go through to your main network, you have still some gaps in the segmentation.
So the whole point when we think about exposure management is that we don't think about individual vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. We need to understand attack paths. So for example, like in this picture, Tuomas just explained that there's a maybe ladder that you can use to bypass the first wall, and then there's a hole or there's a connection from the cloud as well. So attack path is basically link between these vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. And most importantly, of course, you need to validate those. So you need to understand that, okay, is this really the attack path that someone could use against my organization?
Exactly. And so if we compare traditional vulnerability management to exposure management, I think this SAND kind of like funnel analogy works very well. So you have all of those vulnerabilities and misconfigurations all the time. New ones are pouring in. They're like tiny grains of sand that are just pouring in everywhere. And you really don't have time to put focus on each of those individual grains. And of course, the vulnerability management prioritization might sometimes look like, oh dear, we have tens of thousands of vulnerabilities. How can we kind of like prioritize? Where should we start? And that's where the exposure management kicks in. So it tries to funnel those things which are the actual red grains of sand, which are the active risks that are active right now and could be leveraged by the attacker. And we have actually some interesting data that we collected from our own Elements vulnerability management users, that what it means if we would switch from Elements vulnerability management to exposure management.
And we wanted to show this through numbers, that it's much more easier for you to understand what would be the impact if you would start thinking about bigger pictures, understanding those cyber risks instead of individual vulnerabilities. So we took those 20 different companies where we can find in the stage 1, you can see that there are more than like 2 million, almost 3 million, 3 million critical individual findings. So these findings can be vulnerabilities, misconfigurations in your estate. 3 million. Would it be like possible to start finding that, okay, what is the most important thing where you should focus?
Yeah, if I would be a partner, for example, managing these 20 customers, I would scratch my head trying to figure out that where would I start from that almost 3 million individual findings.
Yeah. Or if you have one company, you are taking care of your own company, the number is so high that you need help to prioritize those actions, what needs to be done. And then if we go further down, the next step is that we still have like 8,500, but there we have already grouped those findings that we start to understand better that how those are related to each other. But that's not enough. So we need to go even further down. And then we are talking about exposure management, where we are linking all of those vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and adding those as a recommendations that if you would fix this specific recommendation, you would remove cyber risk in your organization, and that would create you the biggest impact to your security posture and improve it all the time. And then we are talking about tens of recommendations.
Yeah, maybe like even one critical per company on average. So that's a doable workload. And then you are certain that you are fixing stuff that really matters. You are just not patching for the sake of patching, which is, don't get me wrong, it's super important to do that as well. But this is all about fixing those identified exposure that is and has a linkage to your environment, which can be actively already used. So let's block those first, and it will then give us much more time to remediate the rest of the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, because of course you have visibility to all of those findings, but this is how you would prioritize your work and where you should start.
And we actually built some examples. These are like a real life scenario examples from our portal. So of course, seeing is believing. So that funnel picture that you see, this is now like in real life, how we are then doing it with the product. So we have this Foxit reader vulnerability, which has a CVS score of high. It's not critical, but it's 8.8. It's relatively high. But would this be really crucial vulnerability in my organization? Most likely not. If you are looking at it in the old CVS score way. So this is from our Elements vulnerability management. That Foxit PDF reader is, I think it was on the 5th page in all of those vulnerabilities, because there are so many ones that are with the severity score higher. So it might be difficult for you to spot that this is actually your biggest issue at the moment.
Yeah, because there are a lot of high severity alerts where you can see that these are the most critical ones based on the CVS's score. But now, if this is a page 5, I bet that would not be your first priority to start fixing this Foxit. But is this then the most important one?
Yeah. So let's see. Now that we are then looking at the end of the funnel, now we are looking at the exposure management recommendation. And the upgrade Foxit PDF reader recommendation is actually on the top of the list. It's not at the 5th page or somewhere else, and its remediation impact is high. It means that fixing this has a very high impact on your security posture. And we can already see a lot of information that, there is only like one affected asset, but a lot of included findings, and we actually have attack paths associated to it.
Yeah, so if we open this recommendation, you can see in the middle already our Luminen AI analysis that, what is this all about? So we can see that, there is information that there is a critical recommendation that you should start fixing it. Why? Because there is an attack path, first of all. So the attacker could potentially leverage this vulnerability to gain access to the intranet, steal user credentials, escalate privileges, and more. So now we are not focusing only that's one single vulnerability, but we can see that there is this attack path. So through this vulnerable device, so that's the device name, it would be possible to get access to this device because of the misconfiguration, or it could be done through phishing. And by using then this vulnerability that is in the Foxit reader, it would be possible to steal credentials.
Yeah.
And through that one, then it would be possible to move laterally from this device to the AD server, because there you can see that the stolen domain admin account, which was stolen from vulnerable device, and that's the way how this risk is visualized through the product, and not just visualizing, but we are highlighting that this is the most important thing to do, because one single vulnerability open door to the whole estate.
And of course, this is a very simple attack path. So of course, the more simple it is, the more dangerous it is. There is only one hop basically needed for the attacker, and they are already into the Active Directory server, which is the crown jewel probably of that estate.
So what is then the next step? How could we fix it?
Yeah. So of course, if we have our software updater patch management component there already in the device, we could look for the patches. And lo and behold, we have a patch for Foxit Reader. And this is also interesting. So the patch in itself is, of course, moderate security. And we can see that CVA score there, 8.8. But actually, that's very important for us to fix. So we just push the button, install updates immediately, and that attack path is then gone. And maybe even, of course, what you should do.
Of course you should automate this action, so then it's possible to automate, and then we would have done this patching automatically, and then of course recommendation wouldn't be there, or it maybe would be there, but just a short time, and then everything is fixed automatically, and then you just know that, hey, you had this active attack path there, but we just remove it. So automation is king. But then we have another example. So let's take this other way around. So now we have Samba software where the CVS score is critical, number 10. So is this then the most critical one? Is this the one that where you should start? That's the question. And of course, it would be easy to say that, of course, yes, this is the most critical one because there is a very critical vulnerability. And we can even see that there is a exploit available that someone could actively use it. So there is a code that can be fetched by the attacker very easily and start utilizing the vulnerability. But if we go to the recommendation again, we can see that there are no attack paths. And actually, we can see the business context as well, that this is actually a test server for finance. It's not something that we are exposing to internet, it's a controlled server somewhere. So is this then the first one that you should start fixing? Of course, it's not the first one, because then you should start from those risks that are more impactful and generate the risk to your organization. This is, well, important as such that, of course, you want to fix this one when it goes to the production, for example. But if this is a test server, this is not your highest priority.
Yeah, and of course you can see the remediation impact here is low. So even though if you fix this, probably you need to fix it at some stage, but to your holistic security posture, it doesn't really improve it because there are a lot bigger risks with attack paths in this particular environment. So how do we collect this information from the exposure management? So first of all, we are collecting information from your managed workstations and servers. So we can connect to your AWS and Azure cloud as well. We can get information from your Enter ID identity. And what else? So
yeah, and then of course we can scan your network so that we can find unmanaged devices, all the network connected devices, and then we can understand your external attack surface better, your certifications, for example, that you are using there. And all this information is then fed to the upper level in the product. And if we there start consolidating the data where we can start building these attack paths. So how these vulnerabilities, misconfigurations from these different asset sources are linked together, that's the way how we will start building attack paths. And of course, that's not enough, because when we are building the attack path, we want to add this threat intelligence, that we understand better what kind of misconfigurations, vulnerabilities those are, and then the business context that we already showed to you, that you can see that this is, for example, test server, so it's not so critical, and that's something that you cannot easily automate because you have that information, you know your estate, and then when we have that information, or also then we can actually do those recommendations, which is a combination of different kind of findings, vulnerabilities, and there we are using the AI powered recommendation engine. This Luminen AI is giving you the analysis. So we have the remediation guidance. You can also, of course, ask help from us, the same that we have in Elements XDR, that if you need investigation help, you have questions, it's possible to elevate this recommendation to us that, hey, could you please help me to understand this better, for example, and then our experts are helping you. Oh, and then of course you can do the integration by using recommendations API.
Exactly. And we want to clarify here that please try it out, because it's super simple to kind of like test it in your environment, especially if you have EPP or EDR or XDR products already installed. So you can start your trialing with just few clicks, and you'll get almost immediately information, and you start to see that how it compares, for example, to the vulnerability management, how much more information you will get out through those recommendations and attack paths. We recently introduced and actually launched this in Sphere. So there is now a free trials button in the Elements portal in the top right-hand corner. So there you can choose the WithSecure Elements Exposure Management for Business, click it through, and then you will get a trial that you can start to use. It's valid for 30 days of no charge. Please test it out and see it for yourself. And this is maybe the recommended way that, well, if you don't want to spend too much time on trialing, we all know that sometimes trialing takes too much time. You need to invest your own time. You need to put maybe some resources to arrange the trial, do the installation. You can actually do it very easy and quickly.
And we want to give you those results as soon as possible, that you can see right away that is this something that actually I need. And the first way to start doing this trialing and testing the product would be to enable our agent capabilities. So if you are already using WithSecure XDR, endpoint protection or endpoint detection and response, or MDR, managed detection and response, then you can just go here and you can see those devices already. Like you have those under device discovery, you can see all of your assets, those computers where the Elements agent is already deployed. And then you can just click those that, okay, I want to enable also exposure management agent-based scanning to these devices. Just select those and click enable scanning.
Yeah. It's that simple. And then I'd say by default, after 4 hours, if the devices are on, you are already getting information into your system. And then the recommendation engine will start working, and then it will start raising you recommendation based on the findings. And then, of course, we do have this internet search functionality. We use shutdown.io. So basically what you do is you can search for your pay level domain information or your websites that are public facing. So for public facing assets, you can scan those with our cloud scan nodes. So you don't have to set up any cloud scan nodes. And this is an easy way to kind of like find your external assets from your domain and just select them, add them to a scan group, and start a scan. You just define in the scan that you use the cloud scan node, which is then in our cloud, and if it's able to access that target, we can scan it and give you the results once the scan is completed.
So both of these two actions are something that you can do in hours. So it's very, very short time, and then you will immediately start getting recommendations and seeing the value that, okay, these are the vulnerabilities, misconfigurations. But what about then the next step?
Yeah, if you want to spend some more time, so of course that's then possible with the trial as well. So of course, if you are not having our agents, you don't have our EPP or EDR or both of them installed, you can use the Elements agent with the standalone XM agent functionality. So it will only have that exposure management component. You just download it from here with the key code, and then you can deploy it to your workstations and servers. And then, of course, connecting to Azure is relatively simple as well. So you do go through the connection wizard to the Azure, and then we can get the Azure identity, so we can see details like, is the MFA turned on correctly for all of the users? Is the user at risk, meaning that are there any known password leaks, for example, for this associated user email address, for example?
Yeah, this is already taking you to the next level, that you are not just focusing to devices, but then you have identities, and then we can, when we are building the attack path, we can start merging those identities and devices together, that okay, this identity is actually using this device, and then it would be possible to move forward. So of course this will give you then better understanding of your estate.
Yeah. And when you do this, actually, especially for Azure, at the same time, you have configured basically scanning for your Azure and Azure resources as well. So it's the same onboarding for Azure Cloud scanning. So it scans your Azure settings, your resources, and gives you recommendations based on that. So findings and then recommendations. So just then, of course, configure the cloud scans and set the schedules when they run, or then run them manually, for example. There is always this default scanning group that you can just click start scanning, and in, let's say, 15 minutes, you should get already results from your Azure. For AWS, we have a similar onboarding, so you can scan also your AWS resources if you have any running in AWS. Then if you go to the, maybe not to the extreme, but you really want to try all of the capabilities of the product, then we are talking about the internal scan nodes.
Yeah, and normally, of course, this is something that even if you would start like using the product and not just trialing, that this is maybe not the first step that you are doing. Let's make sure that we will first handle those scans through those agent scans, identities, cloud, and when everything is working, then you can expand this to your network, and you can start scanning your internal network, for example, because this internal scan node means that then you will deploy our scanning capabilities to your Windows server or Linux server, and then through that one you can specify that I have this specific network segments in my organization, and then I would like to scan and find out what can I find from that or those specific networks. And of course it might be that you have several scan nodes.
Yeah, so you have several subnets which are air gapped, or they are segmented in a way that you actually need to place one scan node in each of those networks. That's of course possible as well. So we are not limiting the amount of scan nodes, but we understand that it's a work for you. And if you really want to test the product very quickly, you will get a lot of results already with the agent. It's the same result as we would scan it with an authenticated scan in the scan nodes.
And I think that there are possibilities also in this phase also that yes, you could use it to find maybe those devices. That's one thing.
Discovery
scan. And then the next one is that then you can start doing that authenticated scan. And I think that authenticated scan maybe requires even more because then you need to start configuring that how the authentication is done, of course, in a secure way.
Yeah. So you need to configure certificates and whatnot and make sure that it's done in a safe way. Yeah. So of course, that's very important when setting up the scan nodes. But this is still possible, but only limitation we have that through that trial button, you cannot have scan nodes immediately. So then if you want to really try those internal scan nodes out, please contact your WithSecure sales representative.
Yeah, and of course we want to just highlight that all this can be done very easily, but think about that how you would get the most value out as fast as possible. And that's the reason why we are recommending that if you're already using WithSecure products, you can easily test the exposure management, enable agent-based scanning, you will get results immediately. Then the next step would be identities and the cloud, and then this would be the last part then.
All right. So maybe to summarize why we want to focus on exposure management instead of only doing the, let's say, old vulnerability management point of view. So we are now back at our beach and our sandcastle once again. So what it usually means that this is what it might look like from a vulnerability management point of view. You might even recognize that the crown jewels are there with the euro sign. Then you are seeing some other vulnerabilities, but you don't really know how these vulnerabilities are linked together. Is there a link together, or could the attacker leverage 1, 2, 3, 4 vulnerabilities and kind of like build their way in to your crown jewels?
And also that can you find all of those? Do you have visibility to all of those elements? Like we discussed already, like identities, cloud, for example. You can see that there's one dot in the cloud as well. So do you have visibility to that one? Do you have visibility that one that is on the beach, for example? And then, of course, the key thing is that how these are linked together.
Yeah.
So, and then we are talking about those attack paths. And now you can see already in the picture that there are clear choke points, for example, in this picture. So meaning that if you would remove one of those misconfigurations or vulnerabilities, then the whole attack path would be would disappear. So then the risk is gone that you can easily start fixing the most important things around your sandcastle.
Yeah. And this can also illustrate that usually the cloud can be the most direct way into your estate as well. So there is only basically one hop in between if you compare that to the left-hand side if you would start from the beach. So this is good to understand that for exposure management, it's very important to understand and validate those attack paths, that they are valid and they could be leveraged and used.
And if you want to hear more around exposure management or WithSecure solutions, of course, we are here to help you, or please contact your local partner. They are, of course, capable to show it to you, and they can do trialing with you as well if that is needed. And thanks for joining the webinar. My name was Harri Ruusinen. I'm heading our technical sales here at WithSecure. And
my name is Tuomas Miettinen, and I'm from Harri's team representing our global sales engineering. So my suggestion is that please go and try out the exposure management. It's super simple to try it out.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much.